and advance. First, these are the sponsors. If you haven't talked to them yet, you're running out of time, go talk to them. They are here for you. They are also the people who made your ticket half price and easier to convince your boss to send you here, so please thank them. You're here because you want to help lead your team to success. And you may not be a manager, but you can definitely be a leader without being a manager. You might be tasked with starting a new project, a new code base, a new endeavor. You might be wanting to fix some parts of your team that are broken, and hey, maybe Scott has some tips in here on how you can maybe fix a broken team. Or maybe you're wanting to start a business from scratch, fully bootstrap it. In that case, the steps I'm about to outline are a little out of order, but I think the gists that I'm going to hammer on are going to be the same. In all those cases, there's a finite amount of time and or money you have to reach success. So I'm going to talk about that urgency a lot. Who am I? My name's Scott. Recently, I took a team from team and product, from Bootstrap to Enterprise. In April 2015, we got started. 0 lines of code, 0 product, and a team of 1, me. And by March 2016, we had our first signed client and have been continuing to grow since. The dev team, including QA and all that jazz, is around 35 or so people now, and things are going well. I started out as architect. That's one of the reasons I was the first hire, because they wanted an architect in the door first. Could you grab that door, please? Oh, yeah, thank you, appreciate it. And now I've graduated from architect to VP, but it's a whole different set of problems and ball game. Still very fascinating and good to have both technical and management stuff. So this can touch on some of the lessons I've learned in both of those roles. This has been a wild ride, and I'd like to share a lot of what I've learned through this experience. There are things we're going to have to skip covering because there's just so much to talk about, but that are part of growing from Bootstrap to Enterprise, but for the purpose of this talk, got pulled into the black hole from Interstellar. So one of the things we're not covering, how to hire the right people. Had a talk on that 2 sessions ago, next room over, and you would have had an opportunity to have a sensible chuckle at a recursion joke, and also how to retain the right people. We're not going to cover that. Hint, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you're interested in that presentation, the slides are going to be in the same place as the slides for this one, so you can go over it. Another thing we're not covering, any money things, whether that's raising funding, sales, burn rates, except just briefly, and how to operate with no money. That's really even harder. Burn rates, I was supposed to click over that. Business plans or pivots. I'm not going to cover that much. This is the Lean Canvas from a book called Running Lean. Very helpful. If you want to pivot, you change 1 or more of these things and then try it out and see how it goes. And to set the stage, the way the rest of this talk is structured, it is going to be version 0, version 0.0.1, version 0.4.0, and you get the idea. Because of iterate. At each stage, we're going to talk about the team you need and the things you need to focus on, and the things that you're intentionally not going to focus on yet. So where are we at? Version 0, there's no code, there's no repo, there's no spoon. There's just people with goals and maybe a vision statement, which would be nice, but you don't always get that out of the bat. The team that you need to start with. To start your engineering department is 3 people strong, an architect, a QA manager, and a temporary combo scrum master / product owner, so the embodiment of all things that will eventually be agile. Those are the 3 people you need to get started. This team needs to be decisive and act quickly, not get stuck in analysis paralysis. What are the things that they have to decide on before writing the product? You need all the things around the product. This is Joel Spolsky. I like a lot of things he says. One of the things he says is that make sure all the team has left to worry about is the product. There's in the notes, there's links, and there's a link to the blog post that this is coming from. Quote, with a software company, the first priority of management needs to be creating that abstraction layer for the programmers. Programmers need a Git repository. Getting a Git repository means you need a network and a server, which has to be bought, installed, backed up, and provisioned with uninterruptible power. And a server generates a lot of heat, which means it needs to be in a room with a lot of extra air conditioning. Air conditioning needs that heat access to the outside of the building, which means installing an 80-pound fan unit on the wall outside the building. If your programmers spend even 1 minute thinking about any of that, you're already losing. This all needs to be abstracted away to just typing git commit. Architect has one main job. and that is to pick the primary technologies. This is at this stage, that's what we're doing. Pick the primary technologies. What are the frameworks you're going to use? One front end, one back end. What database engine, etc. Tip, choose boring technologies. This is an image from a lovely blog post again in the notes called Choose Boring Technology. And it goes into this concept of having 3 innovation tokens. Your company has 3 innovation tokens when you start. You get to spend those however you want, and the more of those tokens you get to spend on your actual core business attempts, probably the more successful you're going to be. So don't spend one of your tokens implementing a leading edge framework. Don't spend one of those tokens developing your own database engine. That's taking the eye off the prize. So choose boring technology, preferably ones that have been around a while. The documentation is out there pretty well, and most importantly, its failure states are well known. Like when there's an error message, you can Google and get the answer what that error message means. So one of the things that I talk about is choosing the best tool for the job. And the problem with saying choose the best tool for the job is a misconception of the words best and job. As technologists, our job is to keep the company in business. And the best tool is the one that occupies the least worst position for as many of your problems as possible. So you've got all these problems. Can you solve it with just these 3 technologies? That would be better than one of these for each of those, because that is just overhead that you don't need at this stage. Maybe you need to grow your technology set later, but start small. Choose boring and technologies that do a lot of things. Architect's second thing needs to plan a monolithic ball of mud. Monolith, ball of mud. 2 different blog posts on this one that are pretty great. One's by Poot and Yoder. Focus first on the features and functionality, then focus on the architecture and performance. And the other blog post has a lot of similar themes from Fowler and Martin. It's how the monolith first. You shouldn't start a new project with microservices, even if you're sure your application will be big enough to make it worthwhile. Because again, that's adding complexity and overhead when you're trying to just get it out there. You got to get off the ground. I didn't really explain what ball of mud means in the blog post. It's a really long one. It's not even a blog, really. They talk about how they say ball of mud is synonymous with spaghetti code. And it doesn't matter. Just get it out there. If it has to be spaghetti code to get in the marketplace, that's what you leave. So that was the architect. Scrum Master / product owner. They have to decide the PM tools. There's this lovely place called G2 Crowd to compare business solutions, and I love it for all sorts of things. It saved me so much time in a lot of it, so it actually helped us find a product we integrated into our product to speed development. So the Scrum Master needs to choose the tools, whether you can use Jira, you can use TFS, it doesn't matter, just get out there and make the decision, you'll figure it out, you have to iterate, it's not the right choice. Talk to the market, which features to make first. Some people have a really clear idea of what they think their product should be, but have that Scrum Master product owner get out there and start actually talking to the people who are going to eventually give you money to find out what they actually want, not just what you think they want. Get that done before you start writing any code. You don't have to do a lot, just a little bit market validation. And I'm going to skip these pieces because, like I said, I was running too long on time, so the next slide. QA manager needs to design the testing ecosystem. What does manual testing look like for this organization? What does regression testing look like for this organization? Which CI server, how will it be structured? Which build phases will eventually make sense, even though you don't want to necessarily build out all the build phases right now. Again, too much stuff getting away from actually shipping code. Will you eventually use Selenium, Phantom.js, something else? Does it integrate with the project management tool that you have, the CI? But again, don't worry about getting it set up today. Just know where you're heading. Pick the tool, build it out later. Also, often overlooked, test management tool. Have a tool that catalogs the test case that QA is going to be writing and also helps drive test plans. So I've got a plan that I want to run when this happens, and I have a plan that I want to run every sprint or whatever. So those are the things that QA needs to do first. Great, we're ready to start the project. Version 0.0.1. You have more people that you need other than just your initial architect. Your Scrum Master has now become 2 people, Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Head of QA still. I've also got here Product Owner, Sysadmin up there, and there's one Scrum team. This is a video I really like to share, and it is one of my most, it's my second favorite motivational video, and we definitely used it as part of our launching our endeavor to make a product. Because it's time to begin. It's time to get your team and yourself inspired and to get started. There's a little bit of vulgar language. That's not cool with you, I'm sorry.
Don't call it a comeback I'll have here for years. I'm scared. I'm scared that my abilities are gone. I'm scared that I'm gonna fuck this up. And I'm scared of you. I don't want to start, but I will. This is an invocation for anyone who hasn't begun, who's stuck in a terrible place between 0 and 1. Let me realize that my past failures at follow-through are no indication of my future performance. They're just healthy little fires that are going to warm up my ass. If my FILDI is strong, let me keep him in a velvet box until I really, really need him. If my FILDI is weak, let me feed him oranges and not let him gorge himself on ego and arrogance. Let me not hit up my Facebook like it's a crack pipe. Keep the browser closed. If I catch myself wearing a tutu, too fat, too late, too old, let me shake it off like a donkey would shake off something it doesn't like. And when I get that feeling in my stomach, you know, the feeling when all of a sudden you get a ball of energy and it shoots down into your legs and up into your arms and tells you to get up and stand up and go to the refrigerator and get a cheese sandwich, that's my cheese monster talking. And my cheese monster will never be satisfied by cheddar, only the cheese of accomplishment. Let me think about the people who I care about the most, and how when they fail or disappoint me, I still love them, I still give them chances, and I still see the best in them. Let me extend that generosity to myself. Let me find and use metaphors to help me understand the world around me and give me the strength to get rid of them when it's apparent they no longer work. Let me thank the parts of me that I don't understand or are outside of my rational control, like my creativity and my courage. And let me remember that my courage is a wild dog. It won't just come when I call it. I have to chase it down and hold on as tight as I can. Let me not be so vain to think that I'm the sole author of my victories and a victim of my defeats. Let me remember that the unintended meaning that people project onto what I do is neither my fault or something that I can take credit for. Perfectionism may look good in his shiny shoes, but he's a little bit of an asshole and no one invites him to their pool parties. Let me remember that the impact of criticism is often not the intent of the critic, but when the intent is evil, that's what the block button's for. And when I eat my critique, let me be able to separate out the good advice from the bitter herbs. Let me impact on fetus or more than a small impact. Let me not think of my work only as a stepping stone to something else. And if it is, let me become fascinated with the shape of the stone. Let me take the idea that has gotten me this far and put it to bed. What I'm about to do will not be that, but it will be something. There's no need to sharpen my pencils anymore. My pencils are sharp enough. Even the dull ones will make a mark, warts and all. Let's start this shit up. And God, let me enjoy this. Life isn't just a sequence of waiting for things to be done.
I love Zay Frank. He has a great show. Had a great show. FILDI is kind of like my mantra, especially at this stage, especially the early stage, like I said, when time is of the essence. You've got to just say, I don't know how all the answers, but I'm going to do something. Fuck it, let's do it. There's more here. You're potentially a startup at this, and whatever the case is, like I said, you've got limited time and money. Runway of whatever time of money and whatever power you're being at is your number one enemy. You've got to ship. And so I mentioned earlier, avoiding analysis paralysis. Just start writing code that resolves story tickets. Just start doing it. Long story short, the place I worked that we did finally launch this thing, it was the 4th attempt. The first 3 failed miserably in various different ways. And one of the ways, I think it was the 2nd attempt failed, this was before I got hired, was they got completely stuck in analysis paralysis. They couldn't decide on what framework they were going to use, and they were like performance testing all these different frameworks, and they were like spending hours on end just like debating which database engine they should be using, but it was all flavors of MySQL. It really didn't matter. They could switch at any time because they're all flavors of MySQL. They were stuck in analysis paralysis. They were afraid to move on to the next step and just get started. And eventually that whole team of people got fired because it failed so bad. Scrum, do Agile. Just do Scrum. I know there's a lot of different types of Agile out there. Start with Scrum. These are the training wheels. It's very well understood. Like everything else, just get started. And I've got a couple of things not to do in that neighborhood. Please, don't do cargo cult agile. I've done that, and it's a painful, painful thing. If you don't know what cargo cult agile is, the cliff notes are, when there's an anecdote that when the United States military was working on World War II across the Pacific, they set up a supply line, and one of the stops was an island, and they set up an airstrip, and they had a control tower and a guy with the headphones, like bringing in the airplanes, and this brought prosperity to the island. All the natives were like, oh my goodness, look at all these great things. And they had to, they just thrived. And then the war was over and the United States left. And the islanders were like, well, where's the prosperity? There's no longer ships bringing in airplanes, bringing things in all the time. And so they built their own airstrip with their own control tower and a guy with allegedly coconut headphones. That's why I think it's a joke, honestly, but whatever, it's a good anecdote. And so they tried to bring in the airplanes by going through the motions. They didn't understand why they were doing what they were doing. They just said, well, if I make it look like what was happening before, it'll succeed. And that's what cargo cult agile is. If I have stand-ups, if I have retros, then I'm doing agile. No, you're not. You're missing the point. It's a key piece of it, and I'll get into more of that in a little bit here. But yeah, don't do cargo cult. Actually learn what agile is about and get into that. One of the ways that we, on this team that actually did make production, we still had a number of stumbling blocks along the way. One of the things we did poorly was we didn't really understand MVPs, like what it really meant to have an MVP and how you make sure you don't fall off the track. Well, we had a 12 sprint epic, 3-week sprints, 12 sprints, that's 36 weeks. That was almost a year. That's not a sprint, that's a marathon. But we thought we were doing agile because we were doing stand-ups, we were doing retros, and it was terrible. That sole mistake has cost our company so much money. Don't do that. Understand why MVPs are born. And so some people say that every MVP is the embodiment of a question. Well, that's an interesting proposal, and I like the motivation behind that. Like, you're supposed to iterate, and how do you know how to shift or change what you're doing if you're not asking questions with the code and setting up tests and metrics to find out what that is. But that's all fancy pants stuff. We're still in version 0.0.1. Do not do MVPs that are embodiment of a question. Do MVPs that ship features, and you can do questions there. So it says don't do that, don't do that. Do ship honest to goodness useful workflows as small as they can be from sprint 1. If you have to, make them Wizard of Oz prototypes. You may have heard of this before. It's where you make a functionality that looks like it works, but it doesn't actually do everything on the back end that you might imagine it would. And one of the key things that I think is a motivator of this that I've heard in other contexts as well is when you're young and you're small and you're just trying to get some traction, do things that don't scale. Do coding practices, do database things that don't scale, do marketing things that don't scale, do whatever, just to get started. And so the Wizard of Oz thing is, I think the quintessential example is one of those things where you say you want to purchase something on a website and they say, I want to buy this, put your email address in here, hit submit, take you on to the next step. Well, whoop, that was it. That was the next step. The next step, someone's getting an email and call you and take your credit card number. If you got to go lo-fi, go to lo-fi. There's a lovely website, servicedesigntools.org, talks more about that from when that's going to be announced. So this is the quintessential, or the essential, in my opinion, Scott's MVP of Scrum. So if you have to do like bare minimum Scrum, this is what I would say is the bare minimum. Point tickets, dev team pulls in, this is very important that they do. Ship the MVPs, have retros, and get client feedback. You can grow your agile practice from there, but if you're doing these 5 things, I would say you're doing actual Scrum agile. And if you miss any of these, it kind of goes off the rails. Like if you're not getting feedback, you're just going to go off into the distance and not necessarily be getting clients. And this one I talked about, we weren't shipping MVPs. We did a 12-week sprint. It's terrible. We, for a while, were pulling them into sprints ourselves, and we would never meet the work that we expected to get done in that sprint because someone else was putting them in as opposed to developers pulling them in. This is the ship it squirrel from GitHub. And if you haven't caught on right now, shipping is key. And as you're starting out, you might not have a production environment yet, but you need to get one as soon as possible. And it doesn't have to be fancy to get it. You can put production on the same box as testing. Just have a place that's called production. You can move it later. And if you don't have your CI set up yet, that's fine. Do a git commit hook. Have that, push it out there and get it out there, and just have a production, even if it's not everything you aspire to eventually be. Because as soon as you have a production, you can start shipping to it. Once you start getting the practice of shipping to it, that becomes as regular and practice as it should be. It's kind of a circular state. So the point is to cement into your culture that shipping software and frequently is the goal. I recently listened to a presentation from an engineering manager who was working at Dropbox, and he was trying to overcome a culture of perfectionism. They would hold back their features for a long time. They would never actually ship them, even though the code was committed, because one of the alleged cultural values there was code that actually works. Okay, that's decent, but they've started to pervert it and not actually ship code. So he started giving out little cheap plastic toy boats as prizes, like 30-cent toys, and people would start to amass armadas on their desktops. And it became a physical reminder that we're supposed to ship and ship freely. It was inexpensive, but effective. We have to remember what business we're in. We're in the business of software development. Joel Spolsky again talks about how the real goal for software companies is to convert capital into software that works, as opposed to this, which does the opposite. Yeah, we're supposed to be converting capital into software that works. To break that down, capital, every sprint is expensive. Treat them like the gold, the almost literal gold that they are. If you're going to prioritize a feature, make sure that feature is going to eventually get you the ROI for the money you're paying these people to do it. You might start, once you start to set these practices, it starts to get a little almost too easy to say, yeah, let's prioritize that feature because I feel like it's maybe important. But if you're not able to say that's going to increase our visibility, our quality, our something that's going to net you some bottom line, that is a money-losing sprint. And this is where burn rates come into play here. Your team costs you X dollars in salaries per sprint. The feature you're coding that sprint better have an anticipated value in the somewhat near term of that same dollar figure. So be ruthless in prioritizing your features. And so that's the converting capital in software. Software that works, if it doesn't work, people won't use it. And that's kind of key. They need to use it and pay us to use it. Otherwise, we're not making our business work. So only bite off in a sprint what you can, dev, QA, and fix the bugs that QA found before the end of the sprint. That's all you should bite off in a sprint because it has to work. If you ship code that doesn't work, the clients will lose confidence in you, your salespeople will lose confidence in you. It's got to work. If it doesn't work, what does it do? Culture. One of the things you got to set up early on in the team as well. It's a big ship to turn. You got to set it up right at the start. Culture, thankfully, is stronger than process. So you put in processes and like best practices, and this is how you do this. But when you set up the right culture that meets the values that you hold as an individual or as a business owner or manager, whatever, it will motivate people to do the right thing regardless of what the process is behind it. And that's what you want. You want people to know what we value so they can know when to break the rules. If you get your culture off to the wrong start, and this is like super vague, I can't really tell you how to get your culture off to the right start. Also, it doesn't matter. Varies what you believe a good culture is, probably me, whatever. But you got to get it set up right because once it gets going, it's hard to change. My opinion, everyone should be a servant leader, especially the manager type person. They should be helping everyone else out on building a collaborative team, but that's just me. Quality. Quality is a feature, like I was saying, it has to work. And testing is not documentation. Some people I've read say unit testing is documentation. No, it's not! Unit testing is part of the product. You need, in that first sprint 0.0.1, you need to start your unit and integration test coverage graph. And 100% coverage of 10 lines of code is still 100% coverage. Go with it, because you need to start tracking that, otherwise you're going to lose track of it. Get your QA person started writing Selenium tests right off the bat, even if everything's going to change too much, so that the tests are going to constantly break. That doesn't matter. It's one of those practices you have to build in, otherwise you're going to be digging out of a debt. I'm sorry, I think camera. You're going to be digging out of a test coverage debt. And digging out of that hole is hard. My team has dug 2 of those holes, and we're currently almost out of one of them, and still far, like a year, probably and a half, I would bet, at earliest, before we're at the coverage level that we want for our integration unit tests. Because that's hard, you gotta devote time to it. So implement best practices around writing your unit tests and your Selenium tests in that first sprint. Even if you're not perfect, it's something you gotta try for. But back to the whole, like, don't worry if your CI is not set up yet. Resist the urge to go big on your testing infrastructure at this stage. Don't roll your own Selenium grid till you need it. Write the tests and run them anywhere. It doesn't matter where or how often they're run at this stage. Just the fact that they exist is going to be your future defense. So if you need to outsource it to something like Sauce Labs first, that's great. Do it. Just get started and then refine from there. Version 0.4.0. Maybe you shipped an MVP of a key workflow to production, your miniature production for the first time. Maybe you have your first customer. This is great. Otherwise, either way, the chance of running out of runway is now slightly decreased, but still nowhere close to enough. There's always a very real possibility you're going to run out of runway. You've got to act ruthlessly defending your ability to keep working through this whole process. If you're lucky, you have the capital to grow your team. And now we have the same leadership team pulled up a user experience person to leadership team, have 2 Scrum teams with a DevOps person and an engineering manager embedded in there, still sysadmin. This isn't exactly, but this feels like a good mix. Standardize. So you've got some product out there, a little bit. Now is a good time to start paying off your infrastructure technical debt, like stabilize and standardize your environments, your vagrant boxes, your Ansible scripts, your Docker boxes, whatever. Get those all uniform now before it bites you. This isn't something you have to do before you start, but it's one of the things you probably want to do decently early so that you don't start creating so many bugs you can't test reliably. And now's a good time to finish building out that CI/CD pipeline. Get the tests running, set up all your build phases, get it deploying to the production in the right spot. Get that humming and nice and clean so you can start to focus on other things. This is starting to abstract even away that piece of the development and just writing the code and the tests. Your tools can get rusty. So you're gonna have to upgrade at some point. Make a plan for that and put it on the calendar. Don't let it become a project to stay up to speed on this stuff because it will bite you. And as soon as it becomes a project, that means it gets prioritized or deprioritized ahead of other things and you will get farther behind. So for us, it's worked out really well that we have 3-week sprints, right? And every 2 sprints, we update all of our packages. And that has been really nice. So our framework upgrades, we upgrade our framework and undertake the migration steps at that time. If a package gets a security update, we're ready to go within a month and a half. That's nice. So make a plan for it. I don't care if your plan is 6 weeks, if it's 6 months, but have a plan, have a mechanism. Start to understand what that's going to look like. And stick to it because you don't want to fall behind. Feature flags. I didn't understand how crucial feature flags were to agile development until recently. They're good for not pissing off clients in production who are using your product already, and now here's this fledgling feature that's maybe not ready for their use yet. If a feature flag covered, you can hide them. This is good. But furthermore, it's really good for not pissing off stakeholders. They're going to say, why are you doing this agile thing? I want to hold this back and not show this to the client until it's got all of these 5, 7 other features as a piece of it that we actually really want to have. Well, if you have a feature flag, you can still ship the code and have QA test it and go through all that process and rigmarole, but still just hide it because the sales guys aren't ready for it. That's up to them. That's their ship to sink if they choose to not show the feature that you've already spent all this time doing. But at least you've done your entire process. It's out in production, ready to just flip of the switch. Feature flags, there's a lot of ways to misuse them. In my experience, the best way to use them is only on new feature areas. If you start getting into like halvesing or like we're going to do a massive overhaul or enhancement to an area, feature flags are probably not the best thing for that. It's only really best used for stuff that can be entirely on or entirely off. Otherwise, it just gets messy. There are ways you could finagle it, but I would not advise it. And feature flags are good for developers as well, not just everyone else, because Git. And long-running story branches are just awful. Where are we on? Oh, metrics. Expand your sprint reports beyond test coverage. We had that one graph, it was just test coverage, 100% of 10 lines. Now's a good time to start having other metrics. And there's a lot of good presentations this conference about metrics that matter. In fact, one of them was Agile Metrics That Matter. It was yesterday before lunch, and the links to those slides are in these notes as well. Some things that I like, I kind of like velocity, but actually a different presentation I saw from one of the Polaris people said that velocity was a bad thing, and I can start to understand why she's saying that in an updated presentation. Average work in progress, bugs created, reopen rate, sprint goal achieved, yay or nay. So as you're starting off a sprint, say the purpose behind these story tickets that we've pulled in is to accomplish this goal, and are we able to meet that goal at the end of the sprint? You get a red or a green at the end of the sprint, and track how often you are actually meeting your sprint goals and getting the functionality out. Code churn, code quality, etc. A lot of good stuff to measure, and now's a good time to start. Take your Agile practice to the next level. You may have been using the Scott's MVP of Scrum, but now it's time to actually do real Scrum, all the other pieces. You can probably still cut a couple corners, but you've cut a lot of corners already to get to where you're at today. You shouldn't be running modified Scrum. Modified Scrum is saying to yourself that your company is special and different and doesn't need best practices, that everyone else out there is doing these best practices because they are the best. You should start doing them too. We're not that special. Unless you're like Facebook or Microsoft or something and you have actual difference in how your business is run, the rest of us should just do like the best practices. Low battery. Okay, cool. We are ready for version 1. Yeah! We shipped, we have production, we have clients, and it's launched. Heck yeah! We're growing, and we still have a long ways to go as what you have done is you earned the privilege to iterate. Because up until now, you might have completely gone under. Like the runway could have very easily run out. Now you might have a chance of sticking with it. You've earned the privilege to it. And if you're lucky, you also get to grow your team again. Yay, 3 Scrum teams. Again, with a mix of DevOps, UX, QA, engineering management, etc. But the core leadership team is still pretty much the same. You don't have to grow that. Now is a good time to get documentation. Because the team's getting big, and the product's getting big, and the lines of code are getting ridiculous. And no one can reliably hold all of this in their head anymore. And we have to be reliable. And so we have to start putting that knowledge into documents. I like checklists. I like checklists for what you do in a pull request. I like checklists for what you do when you're publishing a new piece of UX. I like checklists for how QA runs their testing. I like coding standards and UX interaction patterns. I've got a lovely document that explains how the CI process works from beginning to end, so once you commit, how that makes it all the way through to production eventually. This is a really good piece of documentation I have, especially for when that new person comes on and they need to learn the CI process, because it can be super complex. Whatever you document, and please do, because you're going to no longer be able to hold it on your head, keep the documentation what they call minimally sufficient, which is to say, just get it out there. Don't spend a lot of time. These documents are not gold. This is all about just getting the knowledge down and not polishing it. Because it will change. It will always change. This is another time, another opportunity to learn even more about Agile, because Scrum for Dummies, while good, does not cover everything. This is by the guys who started Scrum. It's a very good book to read. Maybe you had forgotten to develop formal personas for your user stories. Do that now, because you're at that level of maturity. Maybe you punted on doing planning poker as part of pointing. That's a lot of things. Do that now. Start doing planning poker. Because you might have been pointing before, but now you need to step up that game. Technical debt. we incurred a lot of this, if you recall. We made a monolithic ball of mud. And now we have technical debt, but we've launched it, so we've earned the privilege to address the technical debt. So also, this is now a good time to stop incurring as much new technical debt as you can. You have to kind of make a shift from the FILDI to, we're enterprise now. We have to think in a sustainable manner, because this is hopefully going to go on indefinitely, 15, 20 years before we have to throw out this code base, right? So if you don't know what technical debt is, you probably do, but design gaps that prevent you from easily maintaining your software or upgrading it. There's a lovely measurement called the CRAP score. CRAP stands for Change Risk Anti-Patterns, which is basically to say how risky is it to go change this code. Is it got deeply nested loops? Does it have a lot of like anonymous functions? All sorts of things that just make it difficult to test, make it difficult to predict what's going to happen when you change one thing over here, what's going to happen over here, and then over another class. So measure your CRAP scores. Yes?
So on technical debt, how do you make a determination type? Is it the right time to do it? Because it's always something else is high priority then.
What we have done, and I really appreciate this, is we have gotten our product owner to really understand that technical debt's going to keep her from getting the new features in a timely fashion that she wants. And so as a part of our sprint planning process, we designate like 13 or whatever, 5 points of technical debt that we will address every sprint. We're constantly working on technical debt. There should definitely not be a technical debt epic that you wait on and wait on, because just like maintaining your packages and your updates, it will never, ever get prioritized. It has to be part of your daily practice of reducing technical debt. And if your product owner is not ready to start prioritizing technical debt tickets, that's when you need to pull them aside and have a real conversation about how long do we want this software to work for? Do we want this to work for 15 to 20 years, or do you want it to work for the next 6 months? Because if you want it to work for 15 to 20 years, we've got to address this technical debt now, because we can't start adding features at the rate that you want and have it be reasonable amount of work to do. Because if you're, I like carpentry. If you have a workshop and there's tools everywhere on your workbench and like sawdust everywhere and oil spilled over your hand, 1/2 of an epoxy mix over here, which is actually how my workshop is right now, you can't get stuff done because you're going to make a bigger mess just trying to accomplish what you're doing. So get that technical debt tickets routinely prioritized, and I suggest saying X number of points per sprint is the agreement.
So
Does that work for you?
Let's say if you have a feature that's kind of touching that area, so
Mhm.
then you're enhancing it, then you're thinking like, oh yeah, maybe this is the time to do the technical debt, but that may be sometimes too expensive, make the feature to be.
Sure.
But an end user point, like 2 weeks versus 4 weeks, they're like,
Yeah.
right?
Well, so what we've done is we've identified as much technical debt as we can, logged all the tickets, got them out there, so they can see, wow, there is a lot of technical debt, and we can't appropriately do all of that, we should do some of it. And we've earmarked some of them and say, well, this feature right here, if we want to do enhancement to it, before we start work on that big enhancement to it, we need to at least pick off the #1 piece of technical debt for that feature and address that as part of that development, that enhancement. We probably won't be able to address all the technical debt for that feature area, but if we can take off the top 1, 2, or 3 pieces and incorporate that into the story planning process, that will help you chip away at it. And that's all you can do at this stage is chip away at it. Because no one's going to stop development for it, just have technical debt in the sprint. I got lucky. What happened there? Where are we? We're in technical debt. We got lucky. We did manage to get a testing sprint once. Because I mentioned we had a big hole that we were in, that we dug this technical this testing hole, and we got them to say, yes, you can have 1 sprint to try and raise your coverage, and we got it from, I think, 30% to 40%, which was huge, but we're never going to get that again. you're unlikely to get it for technical debt, so don't plan on that. Yes?
You mentioned to measure your CRAP score.
Yes.
How do you do that?
There are tools. And I don't know the tools necessarily for .NET. I am not necessarily a .NET developer, but I'm sure there's got to be one out there. And if not, maybe the one for PHP would work. I don't know. Because it evaluates things like deeply nested loops. Are you looking for a particular tool, or are you looking like, how would you record that on an ongoing basis?
This is a new concept for me.
All right, cool. So I would say run the thing on your code base. You point at the code directory, and it spits out, at the folder level, at least the one I have, at the folder level, it'll say, this folder has a crap score of this, and this folder is a crap score of that, and you can drill in and then differentiate inside that folder. There's these 5 other folders, and each of those have a crap score of whatever. And so if you could do it on your whole project and just track that one crap score over time, you can at least say, yes, this is going down. And that's what you want to do. You want to make sure the crap score is going down. You could get more nuanced, but I don't think that's a useful graph to create. It will be more messy than anything.
And that'll be a measure of reduced technical debt?
Yes, effectively. It'll increase your ability to change without risk. And if you're doing coding right, writing solid code, the crap score is basically how non-solid is your code. And it's not a whole lot you can do specific, it's a lagging indicator, right? So you run this at the end of the sprint along with your code coverage, and you say, okay, our code coverage went up 1% and our crap score went down 2%. Yay, that's good. If they go the other direction, you can be like, that's not great, let's hope that doesn't become a trend, let's alert people, please don't let this become a trend. As soon as it starts becoming a trend, then you have to like actually go have very serious conversations. Hey guys, you're writing crappy code. It's nice to have that measurement. We have a tool that we are getting ready to install or adopt that it's called Sonar Cube that will allow us to run coverage and crap and everything on every pull request. So that's going to be exciting because right now we just get to run it at the end of the sprint and we're going to have a lot more granular. This ticket, does this ticket increase our coverage or decrease our coverage? Does this ticket increase or decrease our crap score? Which will be useful because you can say then, hey developer, please, when possible, don't write code that increases our crap score or decreases our coverage. Just incrementally chip away at that. I think Sonar Cube would work for other things. I don't think it's PHP only. I've used it in Java. Excellent, good. It works on Java too. 1.14.0, we've been in production for a while. We've iterated a bunch. Hopefully we got a lot more clients. You're doing it. It's happening. Now it's time to start thinking about the future because you've gotten over the hump of starting. You have launched. So I've got a couple short videos here, and they're both Simon Sinek because I kind of really like Simon Sinek. Here it is.
There are two things that I think that great leaders need to have: empathy and perspective. And I think these things are very often forgotten. Leaders are so often so concerned about their status or their position in an organization, they actually forget their real job. And the real job of a leader is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in our charge. And I don't think people realize this, and I don't think people train for this. When we're junior, our only responsibility is to be good at our jobs. That's all that we really have to do. And some people actually go get advanced educations so that they can be really good at their jobs, accountants or whatever, right? And you show up and you work hard, and the company will give us tons and tons of training how to do our jobs. They'll show us how to use the software, they'll send us away for a few days to get trained in whatever it is that we're doing for the company. And then they expect us to go be good at our jobs. And that's what we do, we work very hard. And if you're good at your job, they'll promote you. And at some point, you'll get promoted to a position where we're now responsible for the people who do the job we used to do, but nobody shows us how to do that. And that's why we get managers and not leaders. Because the reason our managers are micromanaging us is because they actually do know how to do the job better than us. That's what got them promoted. Really what we have to do is go through a transition. Some people make it quickly, some people make it slowly, and unfortunately some people will never make that transition at all. Which is we have to go through this transition of being responsible for the job and then turning into somebody who's now responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. And as I said before, one of the great things that is lacking in most of our companies is that they are not teaching us how to lead. And leadership is a skill like any other. It is a practicable, learnable skill. And it is something that you work on. It's like a muscle. If you practice it all the days, you will get good at it and you will become a strong leader. If you stop practicing, you will become a weak leader.
So that's very true. you need to get mentorship for yourself as a leader to continue to grow, because there's a lot of different things that you didn't get to do as a developer but are now crucial to the success of the organization. Plato, I really respect these guys. I have a subscription with them. They do engineering management leadership mentoring. They do it through Slack, and you get to ask them tactical questions, and then they eventually pair you up with a long-term mentor that you get to check in with as your progress evolves over time. So if you're in a company like Microsoft, there's going to be leaders that you can get mentorship internally for free, that's fine. I work at an 80-person company. Only half of that company is about technical stuff, and I'm in charge of technology things, and I've got no one to go to ask advice. How do you do this? Is it important to do this? And Plato, these guys have engineering talent, mostly from the Valley, that you can basically ping them for advice all the time. That's low. Highly recommend getting mentorship for yourself as a leader. And even if you don't use Plato, get mentorship, get it locally. Find people, have lunches with them. Just have conversations, even if they're peer mentorships. I've got a lot of peer mentorship relationships where we kvetch about different things, and they say, man, I'm having a really hard time integrating this team from this company we acquired. I'm like, I've never done acquisition before, and what would that do to the culture? That's crazy. And so I'm learning from him in that regard, but it's not something that I tactically need right now. When I have something I tactically need right now, I go to Plato, and they're able to answer for me, because what they do is they find the right person to match you with. Very much like. Second talk, this one is about keeping the business going.
In game theory, there are two kinds of games. There are finite games and there are infinite games. And this is how you're going to change your perspective, right? A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Baseball, for example. We know the rules, we all agree to the rules, and whoever has more runs at the end of 9 innings is the winner, and the game is over. No one ever says, if we can just play 2 more innings, I know we can come back. It doesn't work that way. The game is over, right? That's a finite game. Then you have an infinite game. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is to keep the game in play, to perpetuate the game. When you pit a finite player versus a finite player, the system is stable. Baseball is stable, right? When you pit an infinite player versus an infinite player, the system is also stable. Like the Cold War, for example. Because there cannot be a winner and a loser. There are no winners and losers in an infinite game, right? It doesn't exist. And because there are no winners or losers, what ends up happening in the infinite contest is players drop out when they run out of the will or the resources to play. But there's no winners or losers. Problems arise when you pit a finite player versus an infinite player. Because a finite player is playing to win, and an infinite player is playing to keep the game going. Right? This is what happened to us in Vietnam. We were playing to win, and the Vietnamese were fighting for their lives. We were the ones who got stuck in quagmire. This is the Soviet Union and Afghanistan. They were trying to beat the Mujahideen, and the Mujahideen would fight for as long as is necessary. Quagmire. Now let's look at business. The game of business has pre-existed or has existed long before every single company that exists on this planet today. And it will outlast every single company that exists on this planet today. There's no winning the game of business. And the reason is because we haven't agreed to the rules. I get such a kick out of this. You realize how many companies actually don't know the game they're in, right? Listen to the language that the companies use. We're trying to beat our competition. We're trying to be number one. Did you know that we were ranked number one? Look at the listing. Based on what criteria? Revenues, profits, market share, square footage, number of employees, based on what time frame? A quarter, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? I haven't agreed to those standards. How can you declare yourself the winner? How can you declare yourself number one where no one else in the game has agreed to the rules? It's arbitrary. There's no winning because there's no end. In other words, companies are playing finite games. Listen to their language. They're trying to beat their competition. What does that even mean? It's the leaders in the companies that understand the game that they're in and organize their resources and their decision-making around the infinite contest that outlast and frustrate their competition. All the companies that we've referred to as the exceptions, Southwest Airlines, Apple computers, Harley Davidson, they're the exception. No, they're playing the infinite contest. They frustrate their competition.
I aspire to frustrate my competition. Yes, all of that. So, was I ready for that? You're in the infinite game long haul. This is the difference between having the plan to have your code base live for 15, 20 longer years as opposed to 6 months. And you got to address technical debt if you're going to play the infinite game. There's a longer...
In game theory, there are two.
Okay. Links to the video, there's a longer video. Simon Sinek has a lot of great videos. I enjoy all of them. Also enjoy Dan Peek's videos. Anyways, so one of the things that you also have to do at this stage is start doing strategic planning. Sounds boring, and oftentimes it has been, because you get things like grammatical discussions as to what's a tactic and what's a strategy and what's, all of that junk. It doesn't help very much. This is an example of how Uber wanted to grow their business. They identified this cycle, that if they could make this happen, their business would grow. And so they did some strategic planning around it using a technique that I only recently learned about called OKR planning. That's objectives and key results, and it kind of boils down the whole strategic planning process to just kind of 2 steps in a sense. The prerequisite says you have to understand your business before you can start to put together objectives and key results to grow your business. Here's their, from these examples, they decided that if they had more drivers, then they'd get more geographical saturation, yada, yada. So how do we get more drivers? Objective, increase driver happiness. And then they defined a score and then measured that score and wanted to get it to the 75th percentile. Objective, increase drivers in the system. And you could do that by measuring the number of drivers in each region, increase that by 20%. Increase the driver average session to 26 hours per week in all active regions. These are all measurable things, and that's the important part. Your key results have to be measurable, and your objective is your motivation, right? There's a handful of blog posts on this. They're in the notes. There's more, I'm sure. But all of the places I've read about this so far, they suggest that whatever key results you put in place, so like say increase by 20%, that they feel they're doing good if they're doing stretch goals, and they have achieved 70% of their goal. So if they only made that to, math, whatever. If they only made that, let's say to 16%, that would probably be a good deal for them. Let's say 14%. So make them stretch goals, make them measurable, track them, do this quarterly. Review your objectives and key results quarterly so you can continue to grow your business. That was the whole content of my presentation. I'm surprised I have any minutes for questions at all, but I'm very open to hearing any questions that you guys have. Anything that you guys want to know about any of the things I covered very quickly.
What was the last video we watched? What was his name?
Simon Sinek. And he's become a motivational business speaker. The one that kind of got him in the door, he did a TEDx in which he talked about the golden circle, which is kind of identifying the why for your business and how to motivate people by using the why, and how like Apple Computer has a great mission statement and people that aren't as successful. So I'm really butchering it. It's great. Go watch it.
I will.
Simon Sinek, Golden Circle, and then he's done a ton of other since.
What's the last name?
Sinek. His and Dan Pink are kind of my 2 favorite management speakers these days. If you don't have many more questions, I do have my number 1 favorite motivational video queued up ready to go, because I showed you the second one. This was a little more fun. Does anyone have any more actual questions about content before I show that? Yes, please.
One quick question is with regards to documentation. You gave kind of a handful of things that you like. Is there a good resource for what types of documentation are good for a team like this to put together? Because I'm kind of struggling to know what I need to cover in my documentation. I'm about to break over to that 1.0.
I would say anything you have to explain to a new hire.
Okay.
So you hire someone in and you need to say, here's what this feature is supposed to do. We've got different feature areas in our SaaS product, and we've got feature primers on each of them now. So that if you are a first-time coder, you're given a ticket that's associated to, say, advanced search. Here's the fundamentals of how this module works, what the class structure is like, the ins, the outs, the interface. This is what you need to know to get started. Everything after that, don't worry about it, it's going to change, but here's the fundamentals of that feature. So you can give the person the ticket, the documentation, and go. And I think another good litmus test of not just what would you need to tell a new hire, but also what do you have to, what is your oral tradition? What are the things that have to get repeated out loud all the time? Write them down. Like if, that's where the CI structure one came in, because I realized that it's actually, I started as part of my new hire checklist, all the things you need to do for new hire. One of them was spend an hour and a half with Scott or one of the DevOps guys to explain how the CI process works. Like, no, I should write a document on it. Because it's intense and there's a lot of things that go into it. What is the oral tradition? And checklists, every time that there is like a boundary in a business process, I think a checklist is a useful thing. Because every time you say, man, we're not learning from our mistakes, or I would really hate for us to have to learn this lesson again, that's when a checklist is really good. Because you have the best of intentions, you have even the experience of doing it before, but you're getting ready to push the code and it's Friday afternoon and you need to push that code before you go out for the weekend. What are the checklists of the things I have to do before I am done? I like checklists. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And definitely keep it all minimally sufficient. Any other questions? 40 motivational speeches in 2 minutes.
Will you fight? No. We will run. And we will live.
Shame on you. This could be the greatest night of our lives. But you're gonna let it be the worst.
And I guarantee a week won't go by in your life you won't regret walking out, letting them get the best of it.
Well, I'm not going home.
We've got too far! And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I'm not saying it's gonna be easy.
You're gonna work harder than you ever worked before.
But that's fine, we'll just get tougher with it.
If a person grits his teeth and shows real determination,
failure is not an option.
That's how winning is done. Believe me when I say
We can break this army here.
And win just one for the giver.
But I say to you,